Amazing moment. Little girl offers her teddy to a sad CO. What happens next will inspire you. Sophie squinted against the sun as she clutched Mr. Snuggles, her beloved teddy bear, through the crowded streets of Chicago. Today was a school field trip to Thompson and Company, the buzzing center of success and adult worries, a place she had only heard about. As her classmates giggled and pointed at the skyscrapers, Sophie felt a nagging sensation deep in her chest. She loved bringing joy to those around her, but her family was struggling. The thought left her heart heavy. Inside the towering glass building, the children marveled at the fancy decor, but Sophie's attention was drawn to a massive office window where Mr. Thompson, the stern CEO, sat looking utterly defeated. What did he have to worry about? The nagging sensation turned to concern as she studied his furrowed brow. Behind the polished exterior, she sensed a storm of anxiety, and her young heart ached for him. She wished she could help. As the tour continued, Sophie's mind raced with possibilities. She imagined herself walking into Mr. Thompson's office and somehow taking away his sadness. But how could a little girl like her make a difference? She started to feel overwhelmed, grappling with doubts. What if he laughed at her? What if he didn't want her teddy bear? She glanced at Mr. Snuggles, remembering all the times he comforted her. Would he even be enough to help a grown-up? Before Sophie could turn back, a thrill surged through her chest. She had always believed in the power of small acts of kindness. Taking a deep breath, she marched toward the sleek office. Every step felt heavier, like she was dragging the weight of the world behind her. The other kids were engrossed in their exploration, blissfully unaware of her inner turmoil. As she reached the office door, her hand hovered hesitantly over the handle. Her heart pounded in her ears, each beat a countdown. Would it even matter? The weight of his potential rejection filled her with dread. Yet, something inside her urged her forward, a sense of purpose, an unwavering hope that kept her moving. She pushed through the door, stepping into a world she felt dwarfed by, yet somehow empowered as she stood before him. "Mr. Thompson," she said softly, her voice steady despite the storm of tension inside her. He looked surprised, his piercing gaze dropping to meet hers. "I think you need this more than I do." Sophie offered Mr. Snuggles, her tiny hands outstretched, a symbol of childhood innocence amidst his overwhelming burdens. His brow furrowed further as he hesitated, caught off guard by this unexpected intrusion. In that moment, the walls around him crumbled, just a little, his concentration shattered by this genuine offering. But could she understand what was looming? The layoffs? The board meetings filled with anxiety? In that split second, he felt a flicker of longing to share his burdens, a desire for connection amidst his sterile corporate life. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. As Sophie stood before him, waiting for a response, Mr. Thompson's mind whirled. Here he was, a formidable CEO, yet he was captivated by the sincerity emanating from this little girl. Her innocent act jolted him, forcing him to confront the relentless pursuit for success that had left him isolated and exposed. With Mr. Snuggles in his grasp, an unease washed over him. The decision he needed to make about his company pressed heavily on his shoulders, threatening to overwhelm him. Could he truly embrace the change he needed, one that not only addressed the bottom line, but also fostered genuine compassion within his company? A storm of emotions pulled him in various directions, his heart battling against the unyielding corporate identity he had crafted. Would he renegotiate his relationships, looking beyond profits? Sophie's hopeful gaze pierced through the chaos, igniting a question in his mind. Could he find balance in the face of his growing fears? As they locked eyes, a world of understanding unfolded, leaving Mr. Thompson at a crossroads. In the silence, the air thickened with expectation, signaling that something monumental was about to change in both their lives. Sophie's small act of kindness had begun to unravel the very fabric of his reality. The weight of his choices loomed ominously, and as he pondered, the microphone of their shared moment echoed. It was often the simplest gestures that had the power to transform. The silence hung between them, an unspoken question lingering in the air. Mr. Thompson's fingers tightened around Mr. Snuggles as he felt a swell of conflicting emotions. Here was a child, lost in a world of her own innocence, unburdened by the complexities of adult life, offering him solace. The gesture struck a chord in him, something he had all but forgotten in his relentless climb to the top. Why did he feel this way? Was it weakness to acknowledge how much he craved that connection? What would it mean for his career? Sophie's innocent eyes stared back at him, as if urging him to reach for something deeper than mere business metrics. "Why do you want to give him to me?" he asked, hesitant but intrigued by her earnestness. "Because you look sad," Sophie replied simply, her little face scrunching as she offered Mr. Snuggles again. "Mr. Snuggles helps me when I feel lonely. I thought he could help you too." The clarity of her words cut through the illusion of his corporate bravado. He had been so immersed in the pursuit of success that he had lost touch with the very human connections his ambitious journey required. Perhaps he had forgotten the necessity of vulnerability, the quiet strength found in letting others in. As he considered her words, part of him longed to reject the gesture, to maintain the polished facade of the driven CEO. Yet another part, one buried deep beneath layers of expectation and responsibility, yearned to accept it, to unveil the man he had almost forgotten he could be. He started, gulping as he fought against the tide of reluctance. It's been a tough few months at work. His own voice surprised him. What had compelled him to disclose this? "I'm sorry." Sophie's brows knitted together in concern. "I don't want you to be sad. Maybe if I share Mr. Snuggles, that'll make you feel better." Her raw sincerity struck him harder than any board meeting could. In that moment, he recognized the paramount importance of emotional wellness, not just for himself, but within the culture he had cultivated at Thompson and Company. He'd been pushing his employees hard, equating productivity with worth, ignoring the toll it took on everyone's spirit, including his own. "Thank you, Sophie. I think I will keep him," he finally said, an unexpected warmth blossoming inside him. "But maybe instead of taking him back with me, we could make a project of this together." She blinked, her youthful enthusiasm brightening. "What do you mean? What if we created a way for people in my company to share their stories, like you just did? A way to remind each other that it's okay to be sad sometimes. That kindness matters." Sophie's excitement bubbled over. "Like a sharing corner? You could call it Mr. Snuggles' Corner." Ideas surged in Mr. Thompson's mind as he envisioned a new initiative, one built on fostering connections rather than driving profits. He felt invigorated as plans began to take shape. But lurking behind the thrill was uncertainty. Would his board embrace this softer approach? Would others understand this shift? Stepping away from the traditional view of leadership and rediscovering his role as a human being rather than just a titan of industry would be a battle. "Let us see if we can make that happen, Sophie. I think we should talk to some of my team about it," Mr. Thompson said, a newfound determination simmering within him. But as he glimpsed Sophie's glowing face, he was suddenly aware of the enormity of the task ahead. Could he really join hands with his employees in vulnerability, strengthen their future while combating outdated norms? The stakes felt higher than ever. The weight of his choices hung in the air once again, heavy with the realization that true leadership required both courage and compassion. The transformation in his trajectory had begun with a child's kindness. But where would it take him next? "Let us see how this project evolves, shall we?" he said, his heart racing and expectation building. But beyond that door was a maze of fears entwined with the hope that had surfaced. What lay ahead would not only test him profoundly, but also redefine the very essence of success he had once held dear. The moment of decision had arrived. Would he rise to meet these challenges with open arms, or retreat back into the safety of convention? As Mr. Thompson stepped away from Sophie and her radiant smile, A cacophony of thoughts spiraled within him. The warmth of the child's heartfelt offer lingered, merging with a rising tide of apprehension. He found himself looking out at the sprawling city skyline, its steel and glass mirroring the rigid structure he had built around his corporate life. But beneath this polished veneer lay an unsettling realization. He couldn't continue playing the role of the indifferent CEO. He was propelled along a journey where the stakes were not simply professional gains, but the cultivation of a workplace infused with humanity. However, the weight of tradition threatened to pull him back into familiar patterns, a gravity he found increasingly difficult to resist. What if his new initiative was ridiculed? How would the board react to this pivot focusing on emotional wellness rather than profit margins? The questions spun relentlessly, feeding his dilemma. When he arrived at the office, the atmosphere felt different, charged with anticipation and an unspoken tension. After exchanging brief pleasantries with his assistant, he settled into his chair, gazing at the meticulously arranged proposals and financial reports cluttering his desk. These sheets of numbers and strategies felt alien now, stripped of their usual appeal. With each calculated decision he'd made over the years, he'd slowly constructed walls around himself, shielding his vulnerabilities. How ironic that he now stood before them, contemplating a crack in that armor, a willingness to expose his less-than-perfect self that he recalled Sophie's bright-eyed enthusiasm. She had proposed an idea so simple yet profound. Mr. Snuggles' Corner could serve as a sanctuary, a space where employees could share their stories, creating an environment where emotional transparency thrived. The thought sent pangs of both inspiration and fear coursing through him. Okay, time to talk to the team, he muttered to himself, determined to take that first step. He scheduled an impromptu meeting for later that afternoon, a gathering that would delve into humanizing their workplace culture. As the hours passed, his anxiety bubbled beneath the surface. A part of him questioned the wisdom of unveiling these thoughts to his team. Was he really prepared for the unpredictable paths this initiative could take? When everyone assembled in the conference room, he stood before them, feeling both vulnerable and strangely liberated. The faces looking back at him ranged from familiar and friendly to skeptical and questioning. He took a deep breath, recalling Sophie's innocent confidence, and spoke. "I want to share an idea with you today," he began, his voice steady yet raw. "After a rather eye-opening experience, I've realized we need to foster a culture that values emotional well-being as much as productivity." He paused, gauging the reactions in the room. Some eyes widened, while others narrowed, perhaps already conjuring arguments against a shift in focus. "It's about creating connections," he continued, forcing sincerity into his tone. "I want to introduce Mr. Snuggles' Corner." The name felt strange rolling off his tongue, yet it carried the weight of something significant, something transformational. His surprise, a murmur of intrigue rippled through the group. Questions floated as hands slowly rose. "How would it work?" Someone asked. "What if it turns into a pity party?" Another voiced, skepticism etched across their face. As he navigated their inquiries and concerns, he recognized a familiar impulse stirring within him, the urge to retreat into defensiveness. But instead, he leaned into the dialogue, embracing their skepticism as valid points. It felt good to be challenged, to face discomfort directly. Each interaction chipped away at the barrier he had built, revealing cracks of authenticity that he hadn't shown in years. By the end of the meeting, his passion and vulnerability seemed to resonate, replacing the tension with a sense of possibility. There was a collective acknowledgement forming in that room. They could potentially shape the workforce into something more humane, one that honored not just success, but the emotional realities of the people driving it. Afterward, alone in his office once more, he leaned back in his chair, heart racing. He had taken a leap into the unknown, not without fear, but driven by the hope that the journey was worth it. Yet, lurking in the back of his mind was a new question. How long could he maintain this newfound openness? The road ahead promised a challenge, a battle against institutional norms that clung to antiquated beliefs. Would the courage he'd found today carry him through the inevitable pushback? He glanced at Mr. Snuggles resting on his desk, a symbol of the innocence lost yet reclaimed. The moment of truth loomed. Would the transformations he dared to seek embrace him, or would he falter when faced with resistance? With a sense of determined purpose, he knew this was only the beginning of his personal revolution. Each step he took into uncharted territory felt like a plunge into a deeper understanding of leadership, one rooted in vulnerability and connection. But beyond this new initiative lay a more pressing conflict. A confrontation awaited him, one that would demand he define the boundaries of his newfound values against the backdrop of a board that thrived on tradition. Would those ideals withstand scrutiny or crumble under pressure? The question echoed in his mind as he prepared for the challenges that lay ahead. The next morning, Mr. Thompson stood in his office, staring at his reflection in the glass windows overlooking the city. The skyline, often a harbinger of ambition, now felt mocking, as if it were judging him for daring to transform himself and the culture he led. He had committed to vulnerability, but the omnipresent specter of the board loomed large. They had built their empire on metrics, on gains, and now he was inviting them to consider a culture of empathy and emotional literacy, a concept so foreign it might very well sound like a euphemism for weakness. As he prepared for the quarterly board meeting, unease settled in. He had provided them with the data and forecasts that illustrated the necessity for change. But how would they respond to the human connection he was advocating? The fear of failure gnawed at him. He was stepping into a ring of hardened executives, questioning the very foundation upon which they had built their corporate strategies. Midway through the morning, he was interrupted by a soft knock. It was Maya, his director of operations, known for her sharp intellect and unyielding pragmatism. She had been a loyal follower of the company's traditional directives, but had lately began to show signs of interest in his vision from Mr. Snuggles' corner. "I want to talk to you about what you shared in yesterday's meeting," she said carefully. "I can see the potential, but we need to ensure this doesn't spiral into chaos." She was right. He felt the weight of her words. It was crucial to shape the conversation carefully, to redefine the narrative. "Maya, you're right. We need structure. We can't let this initiative turn into an emotional free-for-all. What do you think about implementing guidelines to foster productive discussions?" Maya nodded, a flicker of approval in her eyes. "If we establish ground rules, we can ensure conversations remain constructive while promoting openness. Maybe start with workshops on emotional intelligence? It allows employees to learn how to express their feelings while also respecting others." The idea had merit. Mr. Thompson felt energy flowing back into his plans. A structure could indeed transform raw emotional expression into something productive, channeling feelings into creativity rather than allowing them to fester unchecked. It was a compromise between his vision and the board's expectations. The day dragged forward like molasses. As the minutes ticked down to the board meeting, anxiety reemerged. He mentally rehearsed the arguments he would present, the statistics he would use to bolster the case for a more emotionally attuned culture. But deep within, a nagging doubt haunted him. Would the board see the value in this emotional pivot, or dismiss it as a distraction from the bottom line? As he strode into the meeting room, he noted familiar faces, each radiating skepticism. The table was set, and he could feel the palpable energy, a mixture of anticipation and resistance. Was it too soon to challenge their deeply rooted beliefs? "Thank you for joining today," he began, his voice steady despite the tremor of uncertainty. He presented data on how emotional wellness could correlate with productivity, citing recent studies that highlighted this growing trend among progressive companies. The initial silence was disconcerting, as eyes flitted between charts and his determined expression. Mr. Thompson, Peter, the CFO, burst in, skepticism lining his position. "While the numbers sound promising, how can we measure the actual return on this investment? This feels like a diversion from our real objectives." An important question, he acknowledged, his heart thundering. "What if I told you the return on investment could be calculated through reduced turnover and increased employee satisfaction?" Isn't a thriving workplace a fertile ground for innovation? The room buzzed with murmurs, and he sensed the unease bubbling into the open. He pressed onwards, fueled by conviction he had unearthed within himself. He spoke passionately about Mr. Snuggles' Corner as a grassroots opportunity for employees to feel valued, to share their experiences freely while growing and learning. But the deeper he delved, the more the board's faces hardened. They were not amused. Here was the calculated confrontation, the very moment that would define his professional evolution or an avalanche of rejection. Your proposal proposes feelings over figures, interjected Marjorie, a seasoned board member known for her no-nonsense approach. In an environment like ours, emotions don't drive success. Profit does. Then perhaps we've been looking at it wrong. He countered, feeling the swell of defiance. When we treat this as a human issue, we unlock potential realms that aren't just profitable, but also sustainable. I'm asking you to consider that emotional engagement is not a liability. It's an asset. Silence enveloped the room, heavy with unspoken thoughts and uncertain futures. Mr. Thompson knew he was walking a tightrope, uncertain of whether the board would embrace this transformative approach or insist on retrenching behind hard metrics. He gripped the edge of the table, teetering between hope and doubt, realizing he had triggered a pivotal moment not just for the board, but for himself as well. The outcome lingered in the air like a breath waiting to be released. What was clear now was that the battle for his vision had only just begun. Would his ideals withstand the pressure of age-old traditions, or was the company bound to steer further into the sea of indifference? The unvarnished truth awaited him just around the corner. As he prepared for their rebuttals, he felt the moment of reckoning draw near. Would he hold firm to his newfound principles, or let fear dictate his journey? The meeting's tension hung in the air like a thick fog. Mr. Thompson's heart raced, yet a clarity began to emerge from the chaos of doubt. Each board member's face, once mere obstacles in his path, now transformed into intricate puzzles that demanded understanding. He had rallied statistics to speak for him, yet now he faced the deeper challenge of addressing the complexities of human emotion against the sterile backdrop of cold metrics. Perhaps a compromise could persuade you, he ventured, keeping his voice steady despite the tumult within. Let us pilot this initiative on a smaller scale. We can create a task force to evaluate its effectiveness over 6 months, focusing on measurable outcomes, including engagement scores and retention rates. That way, you'll see the benefit without fully committing until we assess the impact. Peter raised an eyebrow, intrigued but still cautious. A pilot program? It does sound like a reasonable start. But how do we ensure the results will align with our expectations? People are unpredictable. Exactly, Mr. Thompson replied, seizing the opportunity. That is precisely the point. By engaging with our employees' emotional landscapes, we might understand their motivations, giving us a clearer insight into how to lead a resilient organization. I will take full responsibility for the results and report transparently to the board. He held their gaze, willing them to appreciate the innovative dynamics he was presenting. His pulse quickened, fueled by the glimmer of newfound resolve. The vulnerability he had once feared transformed into a strong, unwavering purpose. Marjorie's brow furrowed, skepticism etched into every feature. And what does this mean for everyone else? If we invest resources in this emotional engagement, what guarantees do we have that results plateau? We need assurance, Mr. Thompson. Her challenge struck a chord within him. This wasn't merely about introducing emotional intelligence. It was a test of his credibility and a distillation of his leadership philosophies. Every investment carries risk, he admitted, but the cost of inaction could be far greater than any trial we undertake. Emotional disengagement leads to burnout and turnover, all of which can severely impact our bottom line. Isn't it worth exploring? Silence fell again. But this time, uncertainty danced alongside budding curiosity. If he could only break down the wall of resistance brick by brick, perhaps they would begin to see the merit in his vision. Seconds stretched like hours, transforming anxiety into determination. He could feel the room oscillating between doubt and potential acceptance. Yet he understood this was the crucial moment, either to forge ahead or retreat in fear of rejection. With renewed vigor, he added, "If we can create a culture where employees feel seen and heard, they will invest their efforts back into the company tenfold." Imagine the power of that commitment, the innovation, collaboration, and loyalty it fosters. Finally, the board began to stir, electric currents of contemplation rippling through them. Maya's earlier suggestions echoed within him, urging him to craft guidelines to make this initiative a realistic proposition grounded in emotional intelligence workshops and structured feedback sessions. With your support, I will lay down the framework for implementing these workshops, integrating feedback loops. We will establish clear objectives to measure interpersonal engagement and productivity, he stated confidently. Marjorie leaned forward, a flicker of interest in her eyes. "You're proposing a cultural shift, but culture takes time. How can we seamlessly integrate this into our existing strategies?" Faced with her directness, he thought quickly. Can we not pilot it alongside a current project? Use it as a test case? If it succeeds, we can expand it across departments. If it fails, we can reassess our approach without impacting the entire company. Maya's approving nod bolstered his confidence. Mr. Thompson realized he wasn't alone in this fight. He had an ally willing to traverse this daunting terrain with him. But his heart raced as questions welled. Would the board truly follow through on their commitments if results were tentative? What if skepticism overpowered hope once again? The room was still, teetering on a knife's edge. Mr. Thompson's gut twisted with anticipation. He had set his course toward transformation, but what if this was merely the beginning of a more destabilizing journey? In this moment of suspense, he faced the reality of not just risking a proposal, but risking the essence of his beliefs. The path ahead seemed fraught with potential pitfalls, but the opportunity for growth shimmered tantalizingly close. But for every stride he made, would he uncover deeper challenges? Would the board members' past convictions smother his aspirations? The answers hung precariously, waiting to be revealed. And in that uncertainty lurked the promise of his next great discovery. His resolve grew stronger as he left the boardroom. The initial exhilaration of proposing the pilot program was quickly eclipsed by the weight of potential failure. Each step he took down the hall reverberated with questions and self-doubt. Had his presentation truly resonated, or was it merely an intricate dance of words swirling in the atmosphere of skepticism? He needed clarity, direction, some tangible evidence that he was on the right path. As he sat at his desk, the office faded into a blur of motion and sound. A quick glance at the clock made him realize he was fighting against the confines of time. The board would respond in the coming days, and he couldn't afford to redirect his focus solely on waiting for approval. He had to take action. Flipping through his notes, he began crafting a proposal outlining the specifics of the pilot program, integrating feedback mechanisms into his plans. He envisioned workshops where employees could openly discuss their emotional experiences, obstacles they faced, and the ways they thrived within the organization. Each idea flowed from his pen, yet with every word came the nagging thought, what if it wasn't enough? Mr. Thompson leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. The faces of the board members lingered in his mind, especially Marjorie's skepticism. Would she be the one to dismantle his vision with incisive critiques? A sudden realization coursed through him. The board's doubts reflected his own insecurities. If he needed them to buy into his vision, he had to first believe in it himself. With renewed determination, he shifted his attention outward. He sought out Maya later that afternoon. Her involvement was crucial to turning his ideas into reality, and he hoped her enthusiasm could help spark momentum. "Maya, do you have a moment?" he asked as she was gathering her belongings. "Of course," she replied, her voice buoyant. "I'm piecing together a detailed proposal for the pilot program. I need your insight to strengthen it. You understand our workforce in ways I don't," he began, his urgency spilling forth. She listened intently, her eyebrows knitting thoughtfully as he recounted the crucial points he needed to convey. What do you think about structuring the workshops around the feedback sessions? He proposed. We can gather employees' thoughts on both the program's efficiency and areas requiring adaptation early on. Absolutely. The more interactive it is, the better, Maya nodded enthusiastically. We could even have anonymous feedback platforms to encourage honesty. People are often hesitant to share in public settings, right? And integrating that feedback immediately could help us pivot as needed, he said, his mind racing with ideas. Yet, as they brainstormed, a sense of apprehension snaked through him. Would this capitalize on the emotions of their workforce or merely collect data? The thought festered in his mind. The goal wasn't just strategy, it was genuine engagement. Days passed. The board meeting reappeared like an ominous shadow ahead of him, looming larger with every fleeting hour. He found himself confronted with the moments he had doubted whether inspiration alone would foster true change. But deep down, he understood that active involvement would be the catalyst to overcome the inevitable pushback. That evening, a wild idea struck him. He decided to invite a few employees to share their insights and feelings about the work environment beyond numbers, beyond surveys. Sometimes stories spoke louder than statistics. After all, how could one measure the pulse of a company's culture without understanding its heartbeat? The very next day, he initiated an informal gathering in the break room. He wanted an open forum, a place for authentic discussions where employees felt safe to express themselves without fear of repercussions. As the participants trickled in, he sensed a restlessness in the air, a mix of curiosity and skepticism. But the moment he opened the floor to their voices, the room filled with energy. Stories flowed about achievements, struggles, aspirations, and the emotional landscapes they navigated daily in a corporate world far too often dismissive of the human touch. Listening, he felt the fire of purpose reignite within him. It was no longer just about proposals or board meetings. It was about real transformation that came from knowing what lay beneath emotions. As the vulnerability in the room deepened, he realized he was forging connections not just with the employees, but with himself. He was unearthing his motivation and commitment to see this through, drawing from the very essence of what he believed was necessary for genuine collaboration. But as he walked home that evening, invigorated yet apprehensive, another question surfaced: would the board comprehend the value behind these sentiments? And would they be willing to embrace this new approach? The weight of anticipation settled heavily in his chest, fueling both his fear and his resolve. All at once, he realized he was on the cusp of confronting his greatest antagonist, the fear of failure that loomed larger than the boardroom itself. Would he find a way not just to communicate this transformation, but to make them feel it? The moment of truth was drawing closer, and with it, the potential to either shatter or solidify his resolve. The sun dipped below the horizon as Mr. Thompson stepped into the office the following morning, the air heavy with anticipation. Each step echoed in his mind, underscored by the impending board meeting that loomed. Confidence battled uncertainty within him. Why did he feel the need for external validation? The employees' stories had stirred something deep inside, a sense of purpose. Yet could he harness that energy in front of the board? He arrived early, reviewing his notes, each line a potential lifeline. He could picture Marjorie's cold gaze dissecting anything he offered, her skepticism an ever-present shadow at the edge of his thoughts. But he also recalled the warmth in the break room when the employees had shared their vulnerabilities. If he could capture that essence in his presentation, he might just begin to shift perspectives. Maya arrived to join him, and when she walked in, her beaming smile cut through the cloud of doubt. "Ready to inspire?" she asked, her enthusiasm infectious. "More like ready to survive," he quipped, forcing a smile back. "What if they don't see the value in this?" "Then show them," she urged, her voice steady. "Remember, you're not just presenting numbers or metrics, you're sharing real stories. You've heard what matters to them. Use that." The clock ticked ominously. With each minute, the knot in his stomach tightened. He opened a new document on his laptop, typing a few essential phrases that encapsulated his vision. Yet, Amidst the practicalities, a sudden thought struck him. What if, instead of numbers, he allowed room for authenticity? He recalled the powerful stories that stirred emotions during the gathering. I want to incorporate a personal story, he suddenly decided, his heart racing. A real experience, something that captures the emotional landscape. Maya tilted her head, intrigued. That's bold. What are you thinking? He hesitated. Something from my past. It's about understanding the broader narrative beyond the corporate facade. As he began outlining the personal anecdote, he felt an unfamiliar sense of liberation wash over him. The story wasn't about his achievements. It was tied to a failure that nearly defined him. When he had lost a project early in his career due to a lack of awareness, the despair had been palpable. But in that moment of defeat, he found clarity about the importance of connection and open communication principles that would now ground the pilot program. Maya watched him, her eyes encouraging. Use that. Show them your vulnerability. It makes the entire thing relatable. But sweat beads collected on his brow as he contemplated the fear of losing control over the narrative. What if they judged the story as a sign of weakness? The questioning bolted through him, but he pressed forward, driven by a resolve to connect rather than perform. He committed to his narrative, but wondered if he was ready to strip away the layers of the polished EO facade. As the hour approached, he paced in the cramped office, rehearsing his lines in his mind. A knock at the door shattered his concentration. The board members began to file in, their expressions a mix of curiosity and reserve. Each one felt like a titan in the room, imposing, but he rallied his energy. When the meeting commenced, he took a deep breath anchored in the realization that this conversation transcended mere business. He shared the emotional stories from the break room interwoven with his personal journey, inviting them to feel instead of analyze, to connect instead of critique. Midway through his presentation, he took a gamble and showcased the feedback he had gathered. He extended the invitation for them to listen to the voices of their employees through a brief video he'd prepared. He wanted the board to feel the vibrancy and struggles within the company, allowing them to witness the human side of their organizational culture. As the video played, Mr. Thompson's heart raced, wondering if this would resonate. The stories poured over the screen, heartfelt and genuine. Laughter and tears filled the room. It was a calculated risk, designed not just for data, but for engagement, a catalyst he hoped would ignite change. When the video concluded, silence blanketed the room. He glanced around, searching for the faintest hint of impact. But just as he was about to falter, he caught Marjorie's gaze soften. The sound of applause broke the silence, and for a moment, the hesitance faded, but a new doubt tightened its grip. Would that spark of connection hold once the meeting was over? As the board began to speak, the tension shifted. The time had come to face the possibility of rejection, reassurance, or something entirely new. Would he be able to carry this momentum beyond today? And at the very heart of that thought lay the ultimate question. Could this presentation not just transform perceptions, but ignite a movement? As the applause faded, Mr. Thompson's heart raced with a blend of exhilaration and apprehension. He could see the board members exchanging glances, weighing what they had just experienced. Marjorie was still studying him, her expression unreadable, a mix of contemplation and critique etched into her features. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson," she finally said, breaking the tenuous silence. That was unexpected. Her tone held a hint of curiosity, but Mr. Thompson felt the weight of her skepticism hovering like a cloud. "While emotions have their place, let's not forget the numbers," one of the more stoic board members chimed in. "How do we quantify the impact from this emotional engagement on our bottom line?" Mr. Thompson's confidence wavered momentarily. Had he overstated the value of connection in a corporate culture? Yet, as 11 pairs of eyes studied him, he remembered the genuine stories he had heard from the employees, the stories that had sparked something within him. He refused to go back. "I understand," he responded, taming the tremor in his voice. "But I believe what we've witnessed today illustrates a fundamental truth. Our people are our greatest asset. When they feel valued, the productivity and innovation that follows cannot be captured by numbers alone." A murmur rippled through the boardroom. He seized the moment, pressing forward. Imagine harnessing that spirit we witnessed. Each story reflects a valuable perspective, and every connection we foster can translate into success. I truly believe that engaging our teams on a human level could lead to extraordinary results. Marjorie seemed to take a breath, her brow furrowing as she considered his words. In that quiet moment, he caught a glimpse of potential change. This was more than a board meeting. It was a crossroads. The subsequent discussion was robust, filled with challenges and counterpoints that pushed him to articulate his vision with increasing clarity. He swiftly answered questions about metrics, proposing an employee feedback system and regular town hall meetings that would encourage open dialogue. Each exchange sharpened his resolve. He was evolving, shedding the remnants of doubt as he navigated deep-seated skepticism. After the meeting wrapped up, Mr. Thompson lingered, deep in thought. Maya approached, her excitement palpable. "You did it. You really connected with them. I'm not sure there's so much more work to do," he replied, his mind swirling with the implications of his presentation and the dialogues yet to unfold. "Exactly," she countered, an infectious optimism in her voice. "This is just the beginning. You've ignited a conversation that could redefine our culture and values." Did you see Marjorie? Her guard dropped by the end, but shadows of concern flickered in his mind. He couldn't shake the feeling that the real battle lay ahead. Had he merely scratched the surface? Would he face resistance if he pushed for deeper change? The specifics of implementing emotional engagement into company policy seemed dauntingly significant. That night, he sat at his kitchen table, staring at the flickering candlelight, lost in contemplation. A thought struck him: the failure he had once faced had taught him resilience. Now he had the chance to redefine his leadership. This was not a mere presentation. It was a call to action, an opportunity to harness a collective vision grounded in authenticity. The question now hovered in the air like charged static. Could he sustain this shift beyond today? With a newfound determination, he began drafting an action plan that encapsulated both qualitative and quantitative measures of success. Each word fueled his goal, solidifying his desire to lead beyond mere metrics. However, as ideas flowed onto the page, he couldn't ignore the mounting challenges ahead: pushback from traditionalists, skepticism from others who thrived on the status quo. And there, as the clock ticked on and the shadows lengthened, he felt the looming specter of doubt creep back in. Would the personal triumph he had felt today sustain itself against deeper institutional inertia? As he closed his notebook, preparing to confront the inevitable struggles, he realized that the true test was not just about winning approval. He would have to push against the tide, foster empathy, and most crucially, face the people who would resist his vision head-on. The moment of reckoning awaited, and soon he would understand just how far he was willing to go to defend the change he believed in. Tomorrow would not be just another day. It would demand fortitude, courage, and a clear vision to illuminate the path forward. Would he find the strength to not only push for change, but inspire others to join him? The morning light streamed through the office windows, illuminating the path Mr. Thompson had to tread. The anticipation in the air felt electric, but shadows of uncertainty trailed closely behind. He inhaled deeply, reminding himself of the stories that fueled his drive. They were not just tales. They represented a revolutionary shift he was determined to initiate. As he settled into his chair, he noticed a slew of emails cluttering his inbox. The first few were from board members, expressing varying degrees of skepticism about his proposed initiatives. One stood out: a direct message from Marjorie, her tone curt and to the point. "I suggest we discuss your approach at tomorrow's leadership meeting. It is imperative that we maintain our operational integrity." The words stung. He couldn't shake the feeling that change was more than an abstract concept to these board members. It was a potential threat to their carefully constructed systems. Determined to make his voice heard, he crafted a response that balanced respect with authority. "I appreciate your feedback, Marjorie. I look forward to the discussion, but firmly believe in pushing toward our uncharted strengths." With that sent, he turned his attention to his action plan, diving deep into the metrics that would back his commitment. Engagement, he wrote, is not a luxury, it is a strategy. The statistics he gathered confirmed his instincts. The correlation between employee satisfaction and productivity was undeniable. Yet, materializing this engagement in the corporate culture felt like climbing a mountain without gear. As he meticulously outlined strategies for town hall meetings and feedback systems, his confidence wobbled, grappling with the weight of institutional norms. The thought of potential resistance loomed large. What if his colleagues saw him as an overzealous idealist? What if their incredulity crushed his vision before it could take flight? These questions enveloped him, tension coiling tighter around his mind. The day dragged on, punctuated by efforts to stay engaged with his team, but the echoes of hesitation kept interrupting his focus. He walked through the break room, watching a group of employees laughing together. For a moment, he envied their camaraderie. Did they see the cracks in the current system? Or were they content with the status quo? The thought jolted him back. Change would not come from wishing. It would come from action. He resolved to approach today's meeting not just as a presenter, but as an advocate. With more conviction than he felt, he prepared to stand firm for his vision. And then, in a surprising moment of clarity, he realized he needed to share not just the numbers, but the underlying stories that had pushed him here. This was not just a shift in policy, but his journey. As he entered the conference room, a wave of uncertainty washed over him. The board sat before him, assertive and skeptical, and in that moment, he remembered the little girl's act of kindness in the video. He had seen the offering of her teddy bear to comfort an anxious figure. Today, I want to share with you something from the heart. He began, allowing raw emotion to seep into his voice. He spoke not only of numbers, but of empathy, the idea that genuine connection breeds transformation. As he poured his soul into the presentation, he noticed Marjorie's demeanor shift. She began to lean in, her skepticism melting away under the weight of conviction and sincerity. But before he could solidify this newfound rapport, the stoic board member from earlier, Mr. Jensen, interjected sharply. It's noble, Mr. Thompson, but emotions don't drive profit. We need facts. The room fell silent, the air thick with tension. Mr. Thompson's heart raced, and he faced the challenge head-on. But what if emotions can drive loyalty? What if we redefine our measurements of success by integrating those stories into our core values? What if those very stories are the foundation upon which profits can grow? He felt a fleeting doubt as he concluded, but it was overshadowed by a flicker of hope. He had stepped into an unknown territory, and to his surprise, he could feel the crackle of possibility. That was when Marjorie raised her hand, her expression contemplative, as if she were grappling with something significant. You may be onto something here in that moment. Mr. Thompson realized he wasn't just pushing for change. He was igniting a flame of potential that could light the way forward. The battle for hearts and minds was just beginning, and it was fraught with risks he could not yet foresee. What would happen when the flame began to challenge the foundations of the existing culture? Would they embrace a new path, or would the trepidation of tradition snuff it out? In the weeks that followed, Mr. Thompson faced a whirlwind of reactions, both within and outside the boardroom. His effort to pioneer Mr. Snuggles' corner began to take root, but it came with treacherous terrain. There were detractors, those skeptics who dismissed his empathetic vision as mere fluff in a world demanding rigid metrics. Yet, amidst that cacophony, triumphs began to emerge. After implementing the pilot program, employees reported feeling heard for the very first time. We finally have a space to share our experiences. One worker, named Carla, expressed in a feedback session, "It feels good to know our feelings matter." Their testimonials fueled Mr. Thompson's resolve, reinforcing the validity of the change he was championing. Each positive review became a testament. Empathy could coexist with productivity, each reinforcing the other. As he reviewed the data from the initial workshops, the results were surprising. Employee engagement scores rose by an unprecedented 30%. Productivity metrics began to echo that sentiment. Projects were completed faster and with higher satisfaction ratings. These tangible outcomes were not what the board had anticipated, and for the first time, the conversation began shifting among his colleagues. Marjorie, once critical, stood beside him in a meeting just 1 month after the pilot's launch. The feedback is undeniable, she conceded. Perhaps integrating emotional awareness into our culture isn't merely a diversion. It could be our edge. Watching her adapt to this transformative journey invigorated him. The contrast from their first meeting illuminated how far he'd come, as well as how far the organization could go. Yet, obstacles loomed large. Critics within the board questioned the sustainability of this newfound approach. They prodded for more quantitative measures while pressing for a timeline that would confirm Mr. Snuggles' corner could truly embed in the company's culture. The pressure intensified, but he embraced those moments with poise rather than retreat. His next step was monumental. He proposed the incorporation of an annual employee story competition, where individuals could share anecdotes that resonated deeply within their work lives. The competition's aim? To reward vulnerability and recognize those brave enough to share their struggles and celebrated moments alike. Presenting this idea brought both exhilaration and dread, yet he felt it would be crucial to establish a framework that communicated lasting purpose. This won't just be a one-off event, he insisted during the meeting. We'll create an ongoing dialogue about personal experiences that can foster a deeper connection among our teams and cultivate a narrative that propels our company forward. As discussions proceeded, skepticism eroded, replaced by momentum that began to align with his aspirations. Months later, amid a crowded auditorium filled with employees anxiously awaiting storytelling day, Mr. Thompson stood on stage, looking out at the sea of faces. He had never felt such profound purpose. Would these tales resonate? Would they tie back to the original mission, the heart of the change? Each individual had the potential to shift the culture, creating connections that fortified their collective strength. As the first speaker took the stage, recounting personal triumphs and failures, he felt that the pulse of humanity broadened through shared stories. Moments of laughter and poignancy echoed throughout the room as colleagues embraced vulnerability, fostering new rapport and comprehension amid long-standing rivalries. When it was time for him to share, Mr. Thompson stepped forward with confidence. This journey began with an innocent gesture, a little girl and her teddy bear. What we're discovering today is that kindness, empathy, and connection not only humanize our environment, but they also drive us toward extraordinary achievements. He felt buoyed by the strength of his declaration, aware of the bridge they had built together. As the event climaxed in applause and encouragement, he recognized the metamorphosis surrounding him. Colleagues embraced old adversaries. Laughter bridged isolated divisions, and shared humanity filled the air. For Mr. Thompson, this wasn't merely about instituting a new policy. It was about transforming an entire culture, the kind of change that transcended traditional metrics and embraced the essence of connection. The road ahead would still hold challenges, but now he stood fortified by an unyielding truth. Vulnerability and authenticity were not sorrowful signs of weakness. They were the new strengths that would define his legacy. And as he glanced out at his colleagues, the warmth of purpose spread within him. It was a new dawn at Thompson & Company, one that would combine compassion with productivity. This transformation reached its peak when Mr. Thompson received a commendation letter from the board, recognizing him for leading an innovative cultural revolution within the organization. He watched as the words spilled across the page, the acknowledgement resonating within him like an echo of accomplishment. He had conquered his fears and insecurities, demonstrated esteemed leadership that valued both professional metrics and the fundamental humanity that powered the workplace. He emerged not just as a CEO, but as a trailblazer committed to fostering a culture underpinned by connection, empathy, and resilience. Now, as he stood center stage, Mr. Thompson acknowledged the truth most vividly. The emotional landscapes once shrouded in doubt had evolved into robust navigational tools, illuminating the pathway to future successes, both personal and professional. With gratitude, he whispered inwardly to that little girl still tethered in his heart. Thank you, Sophie. For her brave act of kindness had rippled outwards, igniting a transformative journey that reshaped not just his life, but the lives of countless others. This was the moment without hesitation. He felt he was exactly where he was supposed to be. To not miss the next exclusive emotional stories and support this journey of personal overcoming, you need to subscribe now. Leave a like to feed the algorithm, because it makes a difference. Share your reactions and theories about this ending in the comments. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support is crucial in uplifting stories that inspire transformation and resilience.